As you know, I love to cook, and one of my favorite things to cook, shepherd's pie. It's not only hearty, it's so easy to make. There are quite a few ingredients according to how you prepare yours. Pretty much anything goes, but once it's done, it turns out beautifully and it tastes delicious. Now, I'm continuing right now to cut up some of the preparation. Right now I have some onions cutting up because I want to make sure that I mix that in with the ground beef later, so I'm finishing up those. But before I do that, I'm going to continue to cut up my potatoes. According to what size proportion you are making, well, that's how many potatoes you will use. Normally about 5 or 6 potatoes to make a nice batch of mashed potatoes. And once I get these potatoes all cut up, we're gonna put them into some boiling water that I have on the stove right now. Okay, we're gonna let those potatoes boil, and we don't want them to get too soft, so we're gonna keep an eye on those. And while we do that, we're gonna grab a couple of ingredients, some mushrooms and some onions, because we now need to start browning our meat. And I like using lean ground beef for my shepherd's pie because, you know, it's all about being healthy. I have our skillet nice and hot so that it can begin to brown. You just want to break that up. Right before I put the meat in, I did have a little olive oil in the pan. So now we're going to work on just browning the meat. That's looking good. The ground beef, it is really browning right now, but it still needs to go a little longer. We come back to the potatoes and they are done. I checked them. You can always tell. All you have to do is check to see how tender they are. It doesn't take very long, so what we're going to do is bring them right over to the sink and we're going to drain them in a colander. Now, one of the things that I like to do after I drain my mashed potatoes, or drain the potatoes before they turn into mashed potatoes, is I like to run a little cool water over the potatoes. It cools them off, and this keeps the potatoes from turning into complete mush. Okay, before we make our mashed potatoes, I'm gonna go back to the ground beef, and you see all the liquid that was in the ground beef. Well, we wanna get rid of that because we wanna make this as healthy as we can make it. So let's pour off all of the liquid that's in the ground beef. Now make sure that you do not pour this in a sink down the drain. You wanna make sure that you use a colander so that it does not go down the drain. And let's just drain it really, really well. Get all of that fat out. Okay, now that we have that nice and drained, we're gonna pour our ground beef back in there. Oh, it's sizzling. You wanna keep it hot. Now the other ingredients. We're gonna use, you can use about a half a cup to a cup of onions. I like a lot of them. The onions really give it that nice flavor, especially if you use Vidalia sweet onions. I'm adding mushrooms. Now it's time for the seasoning. Okay, now it's time for the seasoning. As I said, I keep it very simple. Salt, garlic powder, pepper. I pretty much use that in every dish I make. Salt, garlic powder, pepper, so make sure you have those on hand. I want to talk to you a little bit about the salt because I've been using Himalayan pink salt. You see it has a pink tint to it. Well, let me tell you, I did a little research and reading on this. This is the purest form of salt. It has a lot of health properties in it, the purest form of salt that you can find. So we're gonna just open this up and start to grind it in. And let's put a nice coat of Himalayan salt in the ground beef, onions, and mushroom mixture. Okay, now a little bit of pepper. Now, you season this to taste. As you can see, I'm not measuring because I'm a good Southern cook. I'm no chef. I like to just season as I go and taste as I go. A little dash here, a little dash there, because I'm a country girl. That's how my great-grandmother taught me to cook. A little bit of garlic. Okay, let's stir that in and get those seasonings really cooked into the meat, the onions, and the mushrooms. And as you can see, the onions are cooking nicely. And the way that you can tell if the onions are done, you want to make sure that they are nice and transparent. Remember, they have that white tint when you first put them in the skillet? Well, now The onions are transparent and the mushrooms are getting nice and tender. Okay, that's cooking up nicely. Now you know for shepherd's pie, pretty much, as I said, anything goes. Well, I have onions, I have mushrooms, I have the ground beef, salt, garlic powder, and pepper, all simmered down. I'm gonna add a couple more vegetables. Well today, and you can pretty much use whatever you want. Today I'm going to use a half a cup of corn. There you go. And I had some green beans on hand, so a half a cup of green beans. Let's mix that in with the mixture. I'm gonna turn the heat down just a little, cover it, and let it simmer. Now it's time to make the mashed potatoes. Our potatoes are ready. We're gonna grab those chopped up potatoes that have been boiled, nice and tender, pour them in the bowl. And as I said, I'm no chef, I just play around in the kitchen, and this is how I was taught to make mashed potatoes, the Southern style way by my great grandmother. Okay, so the potatoes are in the bowl. I'm just going to add some milk, a little bit of milk to make it a little thicker, a little bit of butter, because as you know, butter just makes it taste so good. And you can be health conscious and do some other things. I'm gonna go ahead, add a little pepper. I like my mashed potatoes to have a little garlic flavor, a little bit of garlic. And remember the Himalayan salt I told you about? Well, we're gonna add some of the pink Himalayan salt. Remember, it's the purest form of salt. Grab our mixer and start mixing. Some people like their mashed potatoes smooth, some people like them lumpy. Really, it's just your preference. Keep mixing them until it gets to just the way you want it. Okay, that looks about right. Nice consistency. Now the taste test. I can make mashed potatoes. Now it's time to mix everything up. Got your mashed potatoes, we're gonna grab a Pyrex dish and let's get our pan ready. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of olive oil and let's line the bottom of the Pyrex dish. You can do this with butter as well. I always like to use olive oil, a little healthier. Now it's time for the meat and vegetables. Oh, that looks nice. Look at that. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna start scooping it in and lining the bottom of your Pyrex dish. And you want a nice heaping of the beef mixture in the bottom of the pan. There we go. Now we have a nice layer of the ground beef, corn, green beans, onions, and mushrooms. Now it's time for the next layer. We're gonna go back to our mashed potatoes and we're gonna start to spread that over the ground beef. And you want a nice layer and just spread it out with your spatula. Okay, now that you have the ground beef and the mashed potatoes all layered in your Pyrex dish, it's time for the final ingredient, and this is probably my favorite. Time for the cheese. Grab a little bit of cheese. Now, as you know, there are all kinds of cheese. Mild cheddar, sharp cheddar, any kind of cheese you want to use, feel free. You can go as healthy as you want. You can go as fattening as you want. The great thing is this can be your special shepherd's pie. Okay, take a look at that. Now it is time to go in the oven. I've set the oven on 400, so it's nice and hot right now. So we're gonna slide it in, close it up, and let that simmer and cook in the oven on about 400 for about 20 minutes. Okay, now it's time to check on the shepherd's pie, and let me tell you, I know it's ready because I can smell it all over my house, and it smells so good. Oh, take a look at that. Perfect. Ah, this looks so good. Now, you probably want to let it cool for just a moment, but you know what? We're going to go ahead and dip it out. I've chosen to put a little bit of bread on the side because you want to make sure that you have something to go along with it. That can be a salad, it can be bread. Today I'm choosing bread. Now I'm going to slice me or scoop me some of this out. Where you see that cheese is nice and melted on top. I like it a little crispy and brown. that looks nice. And again, the longer you let it cool, the more it will stick together. But I'm deciding I'm pretty hungry, so I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that I dip it out for you because I want to take a taste. Now's the time, the real test. Time for that taste. Shepherd's pie. Ah, it looks so good. Delicious every time. Delicious shepherd's pie.